Hey ethics class, you guys ready to get kind of real? So this week, of course, we are talking about self-awareness, having self-insight, understanding the importance of self-care, and understanding that what we do as counselors can bring about a lot of burnout. And your ability to understand yourself, care for yourself, and maintain healthy functioning in your own life is going to have a huge impact on clients. So in addition to the reading this week, which I'm sure you've already finished, I wanted to provide a short lecture to dive a little bit more into some prompts for your own self-awareness and recommend some tools for continuing to grow your own ability to be aware of yourself, understand yourself, so you can begin to promote more wellness in your own life. Let's go. Quote time. Every human has four endowments: self-awareness, conscience, independent will, and creative imagination. These give us the ultimate human freedom, the power to choose, to respond, and to change. Stephen Covey. Again, this week we're talking about self-awareness and how that relates to the counselor as a person and a professional. So self-awareness, as I've mentioned before, it is very challenging to become a counselor and rewarding at the same time. But as a counselor in training, and as a professional counselor, you will constantly, for the rest of your life, to grow as a counselor in your skills and to maintain health so that you can be a good counselor to others, you have to continue to nurture your own self-awareness. But when we talk about self-awareness with a lot of new counselors, one of the hardest parts is that with increasing how much you're paying attention to yourself, there can also be this piece of heightened self-focus that can sometimes create some anxiety and tension, because perhaps we're not always paying attention to ourselves, and then we do, and we might notice more things that we aren't as fond of or don't like or aren't sure about, so that can be really common, and we'll address that a bit here. But if we imagine why self-awareness is so important for helpers, when I've been burnt out and not doing well personally, that really shows up in my ability to be present with clients. If it's just me being exhausted and not eating the right foods and getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, even physically, if I'm burnt out and not aware of how I'm doing physically, I'm not as able to listen to my clients, I'm getting tired, I'm getting exhausted, and I could make some mistakes that are going to be impactful to my clients. But similarly, when we're not emotionally well, I'm sure that you can imagine it comes out, and you also might be more sensitive to things going on with your clients. So you might be reacting more internally, and that can impact how you respond to them externally. So self-awareness, again, is just super important for what we do. But I also want to highlight that we're going to be talking about two things: self-awareness and self-insight. What's the difference? Being aware, self-awareness, is just knowing that something is there. We're inviting you first into the process of just being mindful, understanding what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, why those are that way, and then that leads to self-insight, understanding why you feel and think that way, understanding why you tend to have those emotional reactions. So those are two things that go together but are separate, and so we begin with awareness, and then we move on to insight. Another really important thing to consider are our motivations for wanting to be helpers. There are a lot of common reasons that people go into helping. I know that a lot of counselors have been through things themselves and they want to give back. Maybe they want to understand better how to help themselves, so they go into helping profession. Being a helper could line up with their personal values. It can feel really good to help others. They might just want to be challenged. They find people to be very interesting. I know I do. Also wanting to make a difference in the lives of others, receiving help, like I said before, and wanting to give back, and wanting to create social change. These can all be perfectly fine reasons to become a helper, but they can also both cause issues. Let's think about that. In the book, one thing that they mentioned that I liked a lot was that helpers sometimes tend to be people who are, for example, good at making healthy decisions, or maybe they've had the habit of being the person in their family or their social system that tends to help everybody else and guide them. They can start to think, hey, I'm really good at that, and they might be, but we can't start thinking that we're the total experts in living, and then we start to give too much advice. We might foster relationships where our clients are dependent on us because we see ourselves as the really skilled helper with a really good advice to give. So it's important to be aware of our motivations, our beliefs, and our values as helpers, and to keep them in check. It's fine if we get something out of helping others, but we can't give everything that we have as a helper just to feel good about ourselves. Receiving help and wanting to give back, that's really wonderful, but we also can't assume that everybody is coming to get help for the same reasons that we did. So I just encourage you to think about what are some of your motivations for being a helper, and what are some ways that those could become a little off balance and perhaps cause issues if you don't keep them in check. Like we said before, qualities of a helper tend to be motivated people who really care about others, who like giving, and there are qualities about that can also get in the way of self-awareness. Helpers tend to be others-oriented. So it's not uncommon, and this was very true for myself, that helpers have to actually learn to be self-oriented as well, to start to pay attention to you, your feelings, your thoughts, instead of focusing out on everybody else. So I encourage you in your own journey of becoming a little bit more in tune with yourself and not just looking around at all the needs of everyone around you. Another thing that we're starting to consider are our own biases. We want to become ethical, multiculturally competent counselors, but we all come into this process with stereotypes. We're also going to be more naturally attracted to others who are similar to us. That is a documented, empirically validated phenomenon. We know that all types of humans on the planet tend to be drawn towards people that are like them. So we're going to have to check some of those biases and some of those knee-jerk reactions when we're working with people who are different from us. We are also more triggered by people that exhibit cultural factors that we haven't been exposed to. It's very common and natural for humans to fear what they're less familiar with. And as counselors, we are expected to go above and beyond in being open to embracing new paths of life, new types of people. We have biases from our personal backgrounds. Family and friends biases influence us as well. For example, I was raised very poor with my mother, and I created a lot of biases from that experiences around people who are wealthier, different thoughts about them, that they must not struggle and suffer. I've learned at this point in my life that there can be a lot of struggle and suffering with individuals who have more means. It just looks a little different. We also can sometimes struggle to differentiate clients more like ourselves. What do I mean by that? I had an instructor tell me once that one day I would have a client that reminded me exactly of me, and it would be very emotionally triggering, and that I might have a hard time seeing what their needs were because I would be so in touch with my own needs because they reminded me so much of myself. And that wasn't to me because I, for some reason, am this special person who was going to experience that. Every counselor experiences that. So preparing yourself now to know that when you might have a client one day that reminds you of you, you need to differentiate that person so you can see their problems and their needs as unique from your own and provide adequate treatment. So all of these tasks that we're talking about, being more aware of our biases, being more aware of our values, being more aware of our motivations, again, self-awareness is the path to identifying those issues and having insight on so that we can make different choices around them. So one thing about self-awareness and insight, much like empathy, is these are qualities that can be developed over time. It's a lot like exercising, I think. Practicing self-awareness you do just little bits at a time, and you get better at it and easier and easier until one day you're a magical counseling guru. You're all going to get there, I hope. Things that can help, though, in addition to different mindfulness practices that we will talk about, and I know some of my colleagues are teaching you in their classes. I've said before, counseling can be one of the best things that you can do as a counseling student, to go to counseling, be a client, and get some more professional assistance in learning about yourself, and self-reflection practices like mindfulness. And just really quick, again, I'm sure that some of my colleagues have discussed the concept of mindfulness. But mindfulness is simply the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. It's about being able to sit and reflect and be open to whatever your thoughts are, not judging them, not pushing them away or pulling certain thoughts near, but just kind of stoically being aware, like where am I, what's going on? And it's about being in the present. It's not about having your mind full of all these swirling ideas, but just calming it down and saying, what's there? That can be, practicing mindfulness is a really useful tool for checking in with yourself as a student, but also when you start practicum and internship. It can be really important before a client comes in or after a client leaves to just check in. What am I aware of? Where am I now? How can I be more present with this client? After a client is left, what did I experience in that session? What did I say to that client? Where do I, how do I think they left me? What might I need to do next session? Just taking those moments, developing that habit of sitting with yourself, being still, and just being willing to be mindful of where you are. Like I said before, as we continue to practice increasing self-awareness, there can be facilitating self-awareness that mindfulness can help us with. There can also be interfering self-awareness. You might have some painful experiences come back up for you. As we start to understand why we feel certain ways, you might also get in touch with some of the negative experiences in your life that have caused you to feel that way. And again, that can bring about tension. It can also maybe bring about personal judgment and shame. We call that interfering self-awareness. So in addition to mindfulness, to combat some of that interfering self-awareness, we want to show ourselves compassion. Compassion is so critical in this journey of learning how to take care of yourself better and know yourself better, because we all are going to make mistakes. So there's an important baseline where we have to accept that we're humans. And I'm sure that all of you already have so much capacity to have compassion for your clients, but do you have capacity to have compassion for yourself? Do you hold yourself to the same expectations, or really lowering your expectations like you will for others, knowing that you will make mistakes, knowing that you're a person with life experience that has been good and bad. So again, I encourage you to remember that compassion is just as key. Be gentle with yourself, folks. And so this is really just a 3-step process when you're becoming more aware of yourself and developing insight. To get that insight, after you kind of know what you're thinking or feeling, ask yourself, okay, so today I'm feeling kind of stressed and maybe hard on myself and maybe feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, when have I felt this way before? Maybe I felt that way when I got this feedback when I was a kid a lot, that like what I was doing wasn't good enough and then I felt bad about myself. And so, maybe I feel this way because I often fear that I'm not doing a good enough job and I'm really hard on myself so that I can avoid doing a poor job. And then how can I make different choices when I notice that I feel this way? So that's the action piece. So if I know that I have a tendency to be hard on myself and exhaust myself because I'm so afraid of messing up and doing a bad job, maybe I can acknowledge that I'm here. I'm in a master's program, so I probably have some skills and strengths. I'm doing pretty well in my life. I also know that I'm going to make mistakes, but it's okay. Maybe I'm okay. And I can begin to be more compassionate to myself and understanding and be more aware of my own emotional triggers and start attending to them in productive ways. So self-awareness, to summarize, over time will lead to more self-insight. Insight that you will need to learn to take care of yourself, to create a steady self-care schedule, and to prevent burnout. The more you know about yourself, your strengths, and your growing areas, the more effectively you can be present with and for others, as well as yourself. A flourishing counselor is a healthy counselor. All right, team, that's it. I encourage you to take care of yourselves this week, and I look forward to our conversation in class. Enjoy the rest of the videos. Bye.